Welcome to the VXSport online presentation. In this presentation, we're going to be looking at where VXSport is today and where we're looking to head in the future. If you've got access to the PowerPoint presentation, you'll be able to use the hyperlinks to view the clips on YouTube, visit our website, or to download the brochure. If you haven't, all these are available at www.vxsport.com. Our endeavour at VXSport is simply to monitor athletic performance. We've set out to design a system that's easy to use, innovative, integrates solutions, and to keep improving. It's the feedback we get from our users, be that from grassroots to high performance to the academic pipelines, that allows us to keep evolving. This feedback has been crucial in the continued development of the software. It is certainly our intention to keep evolving both the hardware and software to keep making VXSport the best product it can be, provide the best athletic performance results it can. Quite simply, we're looking for professional performance and a realistic price point where more and more people can get access to this type of technology. So who's already getting the benefit of VXSport? During the 2009-2010 season, the Hurricane Super Rugby team were introduced to the VXSport system. With feedback from trainers, coaches and players all being positive, it has been recommended and then cemented in the 2010-2011 season. The Hurricanes extended its use not just purely to monitor athlete workloads, but also to look at their academy program to try and ascertain athlete biometrics that can be included in injury surveillance programs. Primarily, the Hurricanes saw this tool as being a way to optimise each player's performance. Other VXSport users include the New Zealand Academy of Sport, the Australian New Zealand Defence Forces, England Cricket, Japan Rugby, New Zealand Cricket, Sale Rugby, Munster Rugby, New Zealand Rugby Union Referees, Canterbury University, Stellenbosch University, the Montreal Impact Football Team, and Massey University. Many of these users have been a part of the process in helping to evolve the VXSport software, VXView. But it's not just in high performance where VXSport is making a dramatic impact. Numerous schools around Australia and New Zealand have already had the VXSport system in to monitor athlete workloads during in-season performance and training. For both health and well-being and long-term athlete development, VXSport offers a solution to monitoring athletes overtraining and undertraining, both of which are equally as dangerous as the other. VXSport has also been used in physical education classes as a great training tool and teaching tool for exercise physiology and learning more about the body biometrics, such as how the forces and lower leg forces are applied when running, walking, or changing direction. The feature list of VXSport continues to grow, but a basic list of functions can be seen here, for maximum heart rate and average heart rate, the distance covered by an athlete, maximum speed, average speed, energy expenditure, work recovery ratios, the biometric output, speed, heart rates, distance are all shown in zone stats, be that as percentage of time or distance, accumulative training loads, multiple event comparisons between two athletes or different athletes over the same event, number and duration of sprints. It's integrated directly into Google Earth, as well as providing both the means to look at individuals in halves or quarters or over the whole event, and likewise looking at a team breakdown, be that for the period of a week or over multiple weeks. VXSport uses four primary technologies to provide athlete monitoring. GPS, which is a 4 Hz system, therefore measuring every quarter second. 3-axis accelerometers, 104 Hz over each sensor. Magnetometers, 52 Hz spread over 3 sensors, and wireless heart rate detection. If all this information was gathered for the period of 2 hours, it would receive 1 million different data records. What we see on the screen here is some raw data. VXSport has some very clever math that hides behind the scenes. It allows us, for users like yourself and me, to have a look at some charts and tables that are much more meaningful than what we see here. Some other specifications are the VX100 and VX220. When new, the battery life is in excess of 5 hours. In full recording, therefore capturing all the acceleration traces and step reports for the biometrics of lower body forces, the recording time is in excess of 2 hours. For long play, by turning off the biometric reports, you're going to get in excess of 5 hours recording time. The dimensions are not dissimilar to a set of playing cards, 62 by 90 by 19 mm. A waterproof case is provided. However, should you be using the device for triathlon, swimming, surfing, we recommend putting it inside a Ziploc bag. The weight is approximately 80 grams. The VXSport has been extensively tested both in lab and field-based situations for longer than 3 years now, be that from the grassroots all the way up to elite sport. It's been tested within the A-League footballers, A1 GP drivers, Super Rugby players and referees, international cricketers, even the equine industry and the military. The picture you see here above was during the David Beckham LA Galaxy game against Oceania All-Stars 11. We see Cole Peverley here, who travelled 5.6 kilometres in the first half of the game with a top speed of 25.1 kilometres an hour and his heart rate reaching a maximum of 205 beats per minute. If you are interested in seeing this video, you can go to YouTube and type in VXSport GPS or go straight to our website VXSport.com. Looking now at the different types of reporting structures that are available on VXSport, they have both tables and charts. Here we see the field report. The red line going across the top of the screen in the worm graph is the heart rate, the green line being the speed. In this instance, we can see two halves being represented. The inside circle of the pie chart is the first half, and the outside circle is the second half. The start and finish point of both halves can be filtered out to remove the warm-up or the halftime break, or you can report as a whole or as a quarter by quarter. Within the bottom right now, you can see a table which represents speed zone stats based on time or distance as a percentage, in minutes and seconds, or in the meters covered. It also allows us to look at heart rate zone stats or the distance tables. From this point, you can go down and export the raw data into a CSV file, or you can print that report off to share with family, friends, coaches, trainers, physios, whoever you'd like, via email or in hard copy. Within both the field and track report, we have the ability to look at the sprint summary. The sprint summary allows us to look at the different times the sprints occurred, the maximum speed, the start and end speed, and the average speed, all expressed in kilometres per hour. It also allows us to see the distance covered for each sprint expressed in metres, noting all GPS limitations. It's fair to say that timing gates are still the most accurate way to dictate time based on velocity and the distance covered. However, we can look at acceleration maximums and averages expressed in metres per second, opposed to velocity, which will be expressed in metres per second only. It also shows us the duration of each sprint, expressed in seconds. On the far right-hand side of this page, we can also see the sprint distribution column, which shows us here that 7 sprints occurred at 28 kilometres an hour, that 1 sprint occurred at 27, and so on. At the bottom of that table there, we can see that 1 sprint occurred at 23 kilometres an hour, but did not reach 24 kilometres an hour, for which there were 2 sprints. We can sort all these headings from ascending to a descending order. We also have the ability to look at a selected period for the session, or just those sprints which have occurred in our fast or full pace bands. In this example, we have set our fast pace band at 17 kilometres an hour. To set this, you'll need to use your VXView software. Largely the purpose of a sprint distribution table is to see how many sprints occurred in a game or in a training session and see whether or not they're mirroring it and becoming sport-specific training. It allows us to drill deeper as far as work recovery times go and how much recovery may be required to better get the physiological response from the athlete required to play that position or within that sport. As an example, we know rugby referees are achieving between 125 and 140 sprints in a game, all of which between 5 and up to 20 metres. Very rarely do they get outside those perimeters, and very rarely do their efforts exceed 3 to 5 seconds. This becomes even more interesting when we look at the total volume or total distance they cover in their games, which ranges between 6.5 and 9 kilometres. It then gives us a very good understanding of what the requirements might be when we start designing a training session for this type of athlete. Comparing pace and distance. When comparing pace and distance, we look at one athlete or one event, or two athletes and two separate events, be that on the same day or on different locations and different days. Within the comparison of comparing distances, we can look at how each athlete is performed as a whole session, in halves, or in quarters. By using your timeline, you can easily drag and drop out parts of the different sessions to edit down what you'd like to look at. You can also set the different zones, be that for heart rate or speed. In this instance here, we're looking for pace and distance. We can see the pace tables have been set up for this example of zone 1 being 0 to 7, or on zone 4, for example, being 17 to 22 kilometers per hour. Within this template, we can also see speed zone stats or heart zone, depending on whether we look at the stats themselves or looking at charts. So there's a lot to be gleaned from the field comparison report, and you can see at the top there indicating both heart rate and speed, heart rate in the yellow line and the speed in the blue. Within VXView, we can start looking at separate athletes. We can look at the same athlete over a number of sessions. In this example here, we're looking at a secondary school netball example, looking at the whole distance opposed to the part, be that quarter by quarter for this netball game, or comparing the warm-up distance to the whole session, and the variables which in that warm-up, be that speed or heart rate that they've achieved for average or maximum. Now the interesting thing here is when we look at the distances covered, highlighted now, we can see that there's quite a large difference of about 800 metres when we start looking at the distance covered for these two players. Now it might be that one athlete had less minutes on the court than the other, but in this example here you would probably say it's based on position, because when you look at the quarter by quarter information, the players have been on the court for each of the 4 quarters of this netball game. Another example you can get out of this is the warm-up. We can see that both athletes have achieved a similar distance in their warm-up, but when you start looking at speed, did the warm-up speeds, were they indicative of what they needed to do in a game? In both instances here, we can see that the top speed achieved was greater in the games than it was during the warm-up, and hence challenging the coach or the trainer then, was the warm-up going to be appropriate? Likewise, we look at the average and maximum heart rate, and this example is probably even more relevant. We start looking at the average heart rate of both these athletes. The average heart rate was 145 and 136 respectively. However, in a game, you can see they're averaging much closer to 160 to 170 beats. Likewise, with the maximum heart rate, we see that it's not too far removed from what they're doing in a game, but again, it's lower than what they're achieving in the game itself. So to discuss things a little bit further now, just based on that same example with netball, we look at a heart rate comparison. The graph on the far right there is depicting the whole session, and you can see that more than half of their time was spent between 160 to 230 beats, being zone 5. However, when you look at the warm-up, it's showing that most of the time there, we'd say well over 3/4 of the time in fact, was spent in zone 4, between 120 and 160 beats. Again, it challenges us to start thinking about, was the warm-up appropriate, or is that what we're trying to achieve? Are there better ways of doing it? Finally, we can look at the game time only. The inner circle depicts the first quarter, moving towards the outer circle, showing the fourth quarter. It's very obvious in that fourth quarter, there's a higher orange component, or zone 4, be that 120 to 160 beats, and therefore you could start asking whether or not the game intensity was reduced, or whether the athlete was not able to work harder for a longer period of time. It throws up a lot of interesting questions. The track report depicts a lot of the same information we'll see on the field report, but yet now we're looking at columns rather than pie graphs. For this reason, linear moving sports particularly seem to like the way this is portrayed. As an example, cycling, rowing. The reason for this is we can set the average speed benchmarks and heart rate benchmarks out very quickly. They're the dotted lines you can see on this presentation. We can then look at the time spent above those different benchmarks, or be that below. We can also zoom in on a particular point. This example here is showing at 21 minutes past 12 that the speed was 15 kilometers an hour. The energy consumption at that point was 70 calories. Likewise, we can do the same thing on the heart rate benchmark, or the heart rate indicator line there as well. Just like the field report, we can zoom in and zoom out of different parts of the session and refine our search. These sort of charts can be used in this graph sense or exported via a CSV file to an Excel spreadsheet where we can start looking at just the raw data. It's very handy in this way. We can flick between two different athletes or sessions. We can also get a very quick indication of the major points of interest, be that distance, speed, or heart rate for the session itself or the portion of that session we're looking at. VXSport doesn't just provide GPS and speed. We also look at the lower body biometrics of the body. In this example here, we're looking at a step report. As we look at the step reports, we can delve into greater depth in due course. But basically what we're looking at is the stride counts. We're looking at the ground impact, be that the force on the ground and also the propulsion back off the ground. We're looking at the horizontal thrust, the hip sway. We're looking at the percentage imbalance between those two different sides, be that leg 1 and leg 2. We can, in this chart here, get a very good indication with that blue line favouring the green side, be that leg 1 in this instance, to say that biomechanically, looking at this person's footprint and the way that they run, we're saying there is favouring that leg 1 for this example. To get an indication of an athlete's gait out in the field has often been quite difficult without looking at it in a lab testing situation. The VXSport thus allows us to get out in the field into real life situations and structure our tests in a way that are very much sport specific, not just for track speed, but also looking at what the progressions might be from when someone is injured, what their trace looks like then compared to when the athlete is not injured, and thus being able to set up some very clear benchmarks of what they should be able to achieve through the different testing scenarios and different types of parts of the season. Within the step report, we can also look at the run forces, the green line there being the step count or step numbers that's going through on the bottom of the chart. We can look at each step for ground impact and vertical thrust. We can compare the impact and thrust for each step along that course of the run. Very handy as far as looking at terms of acceleration, were they producing as much impact on the ground as thrust off the ground and vice versa. We determine impact as like the slapping you'll hear or the touch on the ground, and the vertical thrust being the propulsion back off the ground. Again, for the coach or the trainer, what we're really trying to achieve here is a good visual representation of different types of events for the athlete, and also something the athlete can understand and relate to when we talk about technique changes, or again, as they become stronger, how does that influence their trace? A very unique feature of the VXSport devices is the acceleration trace, using the accelerometers to pick up the impact and forces on the lower body as they accelerate or at top speeds. This example here, if we look at it just in isolation, we can either choose to look at the forward, sidewards, or vertical forces that the body is experiencing. Let's just focus, for argument's sake, on the vertical, being the blue line in this case. Anything above the midpoint where 0 appears on the axis, anything above the line is considered impact. Anything below the line there is considered propulsion. What we're looking to try and work out is this the most effective way for this athlete to run? Is technique going to influence how much force they produce on the ground? Likewise, their strength and conditioning program. It also allows us to get a good indication of an athlete's benchmarks or what they should look like when they're injured compared to not being injured. The offset time on the bottom there is displayed in seconds. This trace here is for a 5-second effort starting from stationary and moving through to what will be close to this athlete's top speed. You can see that each blue peak is indicative of one leg strike on the ground. And for this athlete, it's taking them, if we count them off, it's taking them about 6 to 7 strides before they get up to 4 units or 4 times their body weight in force. However, you can see the next peak drops back down again. When it drops back down, it would say that that leg is misfiring. So each of those blue peaks is an alternate leg. If we then deem this athlete to have taken a long time to produce maximum force, and also that to count those legs off, that the same leg is misfiring or not producing the same amount of force as the dominant leg, we can then start to redesign or make an intervention into their strength and conditioning program, or better assess that person's injuries at this point. In this second example here, we can then begin to consider what an effective athlete may look like, or an athlete that has got a better rate of acceleration. Again, we'll look at the blue lines being the vertical. In this instance here, you can see that in a very short space of time, be that if we say that he started moving just after half a second, just after 1 second, we can already see 4 times or 4 Gs hitting the ground. Now, you can see the peaks compared to the last example are much closer together, and they're much more even throughout that acceleration trace, making it very easy to see what it might be between 2 athletes or the same athlete in sessions that are some way apart for the purpose of benchmarking, strength and conditioning, and injury surveillance. Location reports allow us to start looking at both the tactical sense of a game, but also for a strength and conditioning coach, looking at where the intense efforts occurred, be that in relation to speed or with heart rate. Both speed and heart rate can be turned on or off in this instance. We can turn off different zones. We can depict both in terms of looking at every quarter second and having an indication of both speed and distance at that quarter second. For a coach, from a tactical point of view, we can look at where the leads were made in the game, what part of the ground they spent their time on. We can also zoom into just a small part of the session opposed to the entire block. This example here is just depicting a little bit over 10 minutes in a game opposed to the whole file. So it's a clever piece of software that's integrated Google Earth directly into VX View. Just like on Google Earth, you can zoom in and zoom out of that location map there. We've also added a manual adjust button to help compensate some of the drift, I guess, that occurs in some of the GPS files to make sure that the file is lined up exactly where it should be on your venue. These reports, like other reports, can be easily printed and distributed to the team as part of a tactical awareness session, or we can use it again as a strength and conditioning mechanism to find out exactly where the intense efforts and load is occurring in that game or event. Another example of the location report, and you can see here that this location report shows a group rowing. You can see that the small little fluctuations in speed are depicted from the change of colour, going from yellow to green, and as the boat accelerates, we can see it going from the orange to yellow, which is again indicative of the change in stroke or the strokes being taken. So you can see the boat slowing down, and then during that orange phase where the strokes being picked up, it accelerates to maximum speed while they go through the reloading and the catch phase, and the boat drives off again. For the same location report we just looked at, we also have an example here of integrating a track report. And you can see that towards the end of this file, in the upper bar there, the graph, we have zoomed in on just over 7 minutes worth of that file. And by pressing zoom, it shows us the rowing file. And those slight ebbs and flows, the valleys and the troughs, and the green graph there, the chart view, is showing us the different strokes that occurred. So you can see with a lot of accuracy the stroke rates, where the boat was decelerating, where the coach or the cox was asking for extra effort. And very clearly you can get an indication of how this relates back to the location report and be able to print this information off either in the graph form as you see here, or export that to a spreadsheet via the CSV function. This file is purely showing speed. There's no heart rate monitors being worn, and with even out the heart rate monitors, it can be a really valuable tool to look at speed and distance across maximum speeds and average speed. One final example here now of a location report is a surfer. We do recommend that the VX device is placed in a Ziploc bag. We are releasing a dry bag in due course, and also really important to make sure that the USB plug is firmly positioned, covering the USB connection. You can see here the time spent on the waves, what the wave speed was. You look at the time spent paddling back out and how that might relate to actual work versus the time they spent recovering or trying to look for waves. And again, from a tactical sense, we can compare two surfers to find out where they actually picked up their best waves. For that same session there, we can overlay that or bring up a field report. Within the field report, we can look at the different variables displayed as percentage or time or distance in each zone. In this example here, we're looking at both the speed on the left-hand side. You can see most of the time was spent down at 0 to 5. However, there was fluctuations where they were getting over 20 kilometres an hour at the upper echelon for their speed. Likewise, looking at the pie chart on the right-hand side, we can look at all the time was spent working at between 80 and 120 beats, or between 120 and 160 beats, just edging out that zone 3. So zone 4 being the more predominant in this example here. Now, it's not always the case we just want to look at one athlete, so we've designed the VX View to accommodate teams, and large teams at that. With the release of the VX330, the real-time device, you'll have the ability to monitor up to 24 athletes with just one receiver. However, for now, looking at the VX100, the VX190, and the VX220, it allows you, as part of the VX View software, to look at the athletes in a training table or a graph situation. So table, pretty straightforward here. We can look at the athlete's name, which we've blanked out, the team name, the date, duration of the file, how long they were training or playing for, the distance covered within that file, the average and maximum speed, the average and maximum heart rate for those people that wore heart rate monitors. There's a number of zeros there, which is indicating that that person was not wearing a heart rate strap, and also the calories or the energy consumption. The final table there on the right-hand side, the column, is looking at work recovery for each athlete, indicating how much time they spent at work and how much time they spent in recovery. We're also able to depict this information in chart form for distance, speed, heart rate, and energy consumption for a period of a week up to multiple weeks of 12 weeks, and the athletes will fluctuate. So if you're looking at 1 week, you may be able to depict a dozen athletes. If you're looking at a period of 12 weeks, you may drop that back to just looking at one athlete, just to really, I guess, optimize your screen real estate and have it on one screen, very easy to view, and again, very easy to share with coaches, trainers, and physios. So as mentioned in the previous slide, we are releasing our real-time device later this year, which will give you the ability to look at 24 athletes with one receiver only. We're looking, therefore, if you're looking to analyse 2 teams or 48 athletes, you'll need multiple receivers, which are simply plugged into the USBs on your laptop or your computer. The real-time feedback and alerts will be released after October 2010 this year. Part of this will involve setting athlete benchmarks to govern when the alerts are sent out. The system's been designed to allow for the substituting of players and turning off players remotely. It also gives us the ability to cover stadiums anywhere around the world, regardless whether the athlete's in congestion or facing away from the receiver. So quite an exciting time to get the VX330 later in the year. One of the key things about VXSport is to offer that end-to-end solution, so suitable for training and match play, and to be able to handle the information remotely to therefore minimise the administration or setup, but also if you further require is to actually take control of that information yourself, keep the databases. It's got a very strong databasing system, VXSport, but in due course we are looking at for the remote handling of that information to, I guess, better acknowledge some of the different training demands and match specificity that different sports have. The real-time units obviously do still provide a huge amount of information, but the power still is going to be in that post-analysis information where more detailed breakdowns can be formed for individual players or teams as a whole. To recap, just to look at some of the benefits of the VXSport, we're really about athlete optimization. Athlete optimization, be that for an athlete development program or for an athlete who's been entrenched in high performance for a long period of time. You can see the story on the right-hand side there. You can either look at the PowerPoint presentation, which is also provided in this folder, or you can log onto the website and have a look at how the New Zealand Hurricanes in the Super 14 or be that Super 15 competition next year have been using the VXSport. Injury prevention is a big one, be that amongst physios and trainers to try and glean how long it takes an athlete to get back to full fitness. We've had a lot of interest through the general well-being of cardiac rehab studies, which Massey University in Wellington are currently undertaking. VXSport can be used to database and look at large groups of athletes, which helps to develop the talent pool. How many athletes can be, I guess, identified of moving through to your high performance program, or just looking at simply in a secondary school situation, looking at what an athlete was like or a student was like when they were 13 compared to when they were 18, and giving some real accountability to the different programs that we see around the world. Again, a strength is in the databasing. We can create athletes or patients' history and look back at that information over a long period of time. We also have the ability to use this as a surveillance tool in health and wellness programs, and I guess better managing that data, be that in the health environment or the high performance environment. It provides us with a great or a greater level of understanding of our game and what the physical responses are that are required to perform at the highest level. We're also looking to increase athlete longevity. How can we keep athletes involved in the game for a longer period of time that otherwise may be cut short due to missed training or suffering injuries that could have been otherwise prevented? VXSport is fully committed to being at the forefront of these technologies. We are looking to integrate other features in due course, but bottom line is that we are going to be very proactive to the feedback you can provide, so we're very interested in hearing back from you. End of the day, anything you can provide is going to help us to improve the game or the lifestyle of the people who are using VXSport technologies. For more information on VXSport, visit YouTube and type in VXSport GPS to view some of the videos on there, be that as an introduction or some of the instances where VXSport has been used. You can also do this via the PowerPoint presentation by the interactive links that are embedded in the presentation itself. By visiting the website, you'll be able to download the brochure or look at the product specifications. The brochure and the product specs are also available on the PowerPoint presentation, so it would encourage you to look at those and again provide feedback and challenge us to how you want VXSport to be used and potentially where you think it can go in the future. Finally to say, thanks for your interest in VXSport. It certainly has been a very exciting project for us to date, and we appreciate your interest. Should you have any further questions, don't hesitate to contact us via www.vxsport.com.